I was born to be a winner, then I'ma grow up to be a go-getter. Blood, sweat, and tears written in the blacks and kings. 1 in a million, the billions that have to say.
Welcome along, F1 fans. Will Buxton here to once again take you through the annals of F1 history and test your general knowledge of the sport with episode 2 of Grill the Grandstand. You can play along on f1.com, entering your answers as you go. Just follow the link in the description. Of course, you can answer the questions in the traditional method with just a pen and a piece of paper. And if you do that, I'll be giving you the answers at the end. So let's get started with round 1, one-hit wonders. Okay, question 1. You're watching Robert Kubica take what was his one and incredibly only Formula 1 Grand Prix victory, just 1 year after that massive shunt in Montreal. But how many times did the pole start from pole? No multiple choice here, just give us the number of times Robert Kubica started a Formula 1 Grand Prix from pole position. Question number 2. Lance Stroll took his first and thus far one and only Formula 1 podium at the 2017 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Crazy race. But the question that we are asking is, where did he start that race? Was it A, P7, B, P8, C, P9? You can see where this one's going. Was it D, P10, E, P11, or was it F, P12? Lance, of course, has a reputation for making up a decent number of places in race conditions. And Baku, of course, is a place where anything can and often does happen. Championship contenders driving into one another, teammates driving into one another, and an unsuspecting teenager grabbing a podium and being gifted a shoey from the race winner. But where did he start that race? Answers in. Time for question number 3. Giancarlo Baghetti, here scoring his first and only Formula 1 victory. But can you tell me which race start was it for the Italian? Did he win on debut? That would be A. How about B, his 7th race? C, his 11th? D, 13th? Was it E, his 20th race? Or F, his 25th Grand Prix? Question number 4 now. Another one-time winner, Jean Alesi. His only Formula 1 win came at the 1995 Canadian Grand Prix, but who finished second? Was it A, Gerhard Berger? Was it B, Damon Hill? C, Michael Schumacher? D, Olivier Panis? E, Eddie Irvine? Or F, Rubens Barrichello? The following year, Alesi switched places with Michael Schumacher to become a Benetton driver, and our next one-hit wonder won his only race for Benetton. It's Alessandro Nannini, who of course won the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix, that very famous race. But which position did he cross the line? Was it A, first? Was it B, second? Was it C, third? D, fourth? E, fifth? Or did he finish it upside down? I guess that's a position of sorts, isn't it? That was question 5, and a memorable race for a number of reasons, which may help you figure out where he finished the Grand Prix. Now though, on to question 6. Heikki Kovalainen's only Grand Prix victory came at which Grand Prix? Was it A, Japan in 2007? Was it B, France in 2008? C, Hungary in 2008? D, was it the European Grand Prix of 2008? Or was it E, the Italian Grand Prix of 2008? Or finally, was it F, the European Grand Prix of 2009? Of course, Heikki Kovalainen replaced Fernando Alonso as Lewis Hamilton's teammate at McLaren, and you can hear from the Finn explaining what those 2 years did to him and his psyche and his career in the Beyond the Grid podcast with Tom Clarkson. Okay, are your answers in for round 1? Excellent. We move on to round 2, Radio Gaga. We're kicking off with this meme-worthy classic from Fernando Alonso in Italy 2017.
What a joke! The 5 seconds. What a joke!
So, Fernando Alonso is complaining in this clip about a time penalty. But who was the time penalty given to? Was it A, himself? B, Sebastian Vettel? C, Sergio Perez? Was it D, Kevin Magnussen? E, Esteban Ocon? Or F, Jolyon Palmer? Something a bit different now for question 2. We reimagined this bit of team radio from Brazil 2019 as an Elvis impersonators contest.
On to the next one, I guess.
What we want to know is, whose team radio was it? Was it A, Charles Leclerc, B, Max Verstappen, C, Pierre Gasly, D, Lando Norris, E, Alex Albon, or F, Danny Kvyat? Okay, let's go a little bit further back to the turn of the millennium. Can you tell me who is getting emotional in this team radio from 2000? Was it A, Michael Schumacher, B, Rubens Barrichello, C, Giancarlo Fisichella, D, Kimi Räikkönen, E, Mika Häkkinen, or F, Ralf Schumacher? Okay, from tears of joy to tears of despair in our next bit of radio for question 4.
No! No!
I think hit us.
That's Romain Grosjean's engineer on the radio in Baku 2018. But who does he suspect of hitting Romain? Is it A, Marcus Ericsson, B, Max Verstappen, C, his teammate Kevin Magnussen, D, Fernando Alonso, E, Sergio Perez, or F, Carlos Sainz? One of the most memorable pieces of team radio there from 2018. Probably quite an easy question. Do you remember the driver in question? On to the 5th question of the second round now, and it's back to Fernando Alonso.
Okay, he pushed me off the track. I think you have to leave a space. All the time you have to leave a space. Okay?
Who then is Fernando saying didn't leave him enough space in Bahrain 2012? Was it A, Mark Webber, B, Romain Grosjean, C, Nico Rosberg, D, Sebastian Vettel, E, Sergio Perez, or F, Michael Schumacher? Two pieces of Alonso radio in one round, you lucky people. And we couldn't do a team radio round, of course, without the dulcet tones of Kimi Räikkönen.
Steering wheel! The steering wheel, yeah.
Tell us then, what was the missing word from this iconic piece of Kimi Räikkönen team radio? Just one single word, and we think it's so memorable, you won't need multiple choices. Okay, pens down, if you're using a pen. That's the end of round 2. Up next, first lap crashes. Okay, here's question 1. Which driver caused Sebastian Vettel to issue this expletive-laden radio message at the 2016 Russian Grand Prix?
Somebody hit me in the rear, turn 2, and then somebody hit me in the rear again in turn 3. For sake. Honestly, what the are we doing here?
Was it A, Daniel Ricciardo, B, Danny Kvyat, C, Max Verstappen, D, Nico Hülkenberg, E, Kevin Magnussen, or F, Pascal Wehrlein? Question number 2. Romain Grosjean kicked up this massive plume of smoke, spinning at turn 3 at the start of the 2018 Spanish Grand Prix. But which 2 drivers' races did he end in doing so? 2 answers for this one from the following selection. A, Pierre Gasly, B, Kevin Magnussen, C, Nico Hülkenberg, D, Fernando Alonso, E, Stoffel van Dorn, and F, Esteban Ocon. 2 correct answers, 2 choices, lock them in. You can jump on board with Roman and experience the mayhem in full 360 degrees on the F1 YouTube channel, from the lead up right through to the aftermath. On now though to our third first lap crash question. The 1990 Japanese Grand Prix will forever be remembered for this championship-defining crash. But who went on to actually win the race? Here are your choices. A. Gerhard Berger. B. Alessandro Nannini. C. Riccardo Patrese. D. Nelson Piquet. E. Thierry Boutsen. Or F. Nigel Mansell. Tricky one. Okay, question 4. Carbon fibre flew at the start of the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix, but which driver, before the melee, had actually jumped the start? Was it A. Lewis Hamilton, B. Romain Grosjean, C. Pastor Maldonado, D. Fernando Alonso, E. Jenson Button, or F. Felipe Massa? For the jump start, this driver took a 5-place grid penalty at the next race in Italy, which added on to another 5-place grid penalty for an avoidable collision. Right, lock in those answers. Here comes question 5. Jody Scheckter's McLaren spun coming out of Woodcote Corner at the British Grand Prix, taking out multiple cars. The race was red flagged, got going again, full race distance, albeit with 11 fewer cars contesting it. But what year did that happen? Put down the year you think in 4-digit form. On to the last question of the round now, and from Silverstone, host of the very first World Championship race in 1950, to Monaco, host of the second ever round of the World Championship. And we are going back to 1950, because what caused 10 of the 19 starters of that 1950 Monaco Grand Prix to be eliminated on the very first lap? Was it A, an overturned car at Mirabeau? Was it B, flooding over a seawall? C, a stray dog on track? Was it D, an oil spill? E, a stalled Maserati? Or F, a flock of low-flying seagulls? Last chance to decide on your answer then, before we move on to our next round, Whose Helmet? Here we go then, 6 questions all about Dr. Helmut Marko. It's not. It's about race helmets, of course. If you, like me, spent all of your school days drawing racing drivers' lids on your school books, this should be an easy round, and we'll start with one which everybody should be able to get. Which 2 drivers sported this pattern on their race helmet? It is, of course, a very distinctive design, and hopefully a relatively easy one for you to guess. Pick your 2 drivers from this list. A. Damon Hill, B. Nico Rosberg, C. James Hunt, D. David Coulthard, E. Graham Hill, F. Keke Rosberg. So select your 2 drivers from that list. Okay, question 2. Which driver paid tribute to Evel Knievel with this motif on their helmet at the 2016 United States Grand Prix? Was it A. Lewis Hamilton, B. Romain Grosjean, C. Kevin Magnussen, D. Max Verstappen, E. Daniel Ricciardo, or F. Danik Fiat? At the time, drivers couldn't make changes to their overall helmet design, so this tribute is fairly minor. But from this year, don't forget, drivers can now have that freedom once again to change their lid livery as many times as they like. Okay, back to an era when drivers kept the same design for their entire careers. Whose design is this? Was it A. JJ Leto, B. Mika Salo, C. Mika Häkkinen, D. Stefan Johansson, E. Keke Rosberg, or F. Taki Inui? That's actually tougher than it sounds. Or looks. 3 simple stripes, a style adorned by many drivers over the years. Okay, let's take a look at a clue for question 4. Whose helmet do you think this is? Is it A. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, B. Jacques Villeneuve, C. Alexander Wurz, D. Tasso Marquez, E. Olivier Panis, or F. Antonio Pizzonia? A few more colours than the last picture and a pretty unique design. Hopefully it's enough to give you the answer. Question 5 now. Who is driving in this helmet? Is it A. Michael Schumacher, B. Nigel Mansell, C. Ralf Schumacher, D. Martin Brundle, E. Mika Hakkinen, or F. David Coulthard? Okay, get your answers in. All you F1 history aficionados, I'm sure, know the correct answer to that one. What about this one though? And it's from the last decade. Who sported this light up, sparkling helmet for the 2012 Singapore Grand Prix? Was it A. Sebastian Vettel, B. Fernando Alonso, C. Kimi Räikkönen, D. Lewis Hamilton, E. Daniel Ricciardo, or F. Jenson Button? Okay, got your answers in? Excellent. 4 rounds done, 2 rounds to go. How are you finding it so far? Are you getting the answer straight off the bat or having to rely a little bit on multiple choice? Well, if you're not so certain about these ones, you might as well flip a coin. It's a 50-50 chance on each of these questions as we enter the round that we're calling higher or lower. Okay, this is a round for you statos out there. We're going to fire some statistics at you and all you've got to do is answer higher or lower. Which one of the choices is the correct answer? Here's question 1. Ayrton Senna had a higher or lower number of consecutive podiums than Alain Prost. So, Senna's run of consecutive podiums, were they higher or lower than the number achieved by Alain Prost? Consecutive podiums. Okay. Of course, as teammates, they won all but one race in 1988. But how many consecutive podiums did they achieve? Not necessarily as teammates, just over their career. Okay, question number 2. It's not an easy one. Was Nigel Mansell's debut racing number higher or lower than Emerson Fittipaldi's debut racing number? I don't even know who writes this stuff. Was Nigel Mansell's debut racing number higher or lower than Emerson Fittipaldi's? Honestly, I don't know. Let's get on to question 3. Did Fernando Alonso have a higher or lower number of career pole positions than Damon Hill? Fernando Alonso, pole positions, did he have more or less than Damon Hill? Both world champions, of course, came up against Michael Schumacher, but which one had more poles? Okay, on to question 4, and it's another really tough one. Gerhard Berger is the focus here. Is the amount of time between Gerhard Berger's first and last F1 win more or less than the amount of time between Riccardo Patresi's first and last wins in Formula 1? Both of them had really long careers in Formula 1. They won early in their careers, they won late in their careers. But was the amount of time between Berger's first and last more or less than Patresi's first or last? Riccardo, of course, was a guest with Tom Clarkson on Beyond the Grid podcast this week. Maybe he told you in that. Maybe he gave the game away. 17 seasons he competed in Formula 1. Did he mention Gerhard though? Alright, on to question 5. Tell me, was Mark Webber's number of F1 wins higher or lower than compatriot Alan Jones? Mark Webber and Alan Jones. Which Aussie had the highest number of victories? Was Mark Webber's higher or lower than Alan Jones? Right, that's your final question for the penultimate round. Get your answers in. 50-50, flip a coin as we move on to the final round. And fittingly for the final round of this week's quiz, it's a bunch of questions all about final races. Question number 1. At which Formula 1 circuit did the great Ayrton Senna record his final victory in Formula One? Was it A, Adelaide, B, Suzuka, C, Monaco, D, Interlagos, E, Aida, or F, Estoril? This was win number 41 for Ayrton Senna. He was, at the time, the second most successful driver in the history of Formula One. His great rival Alain Prost having the most Grand Prix victories at the time, and who was also on the podium with him. On to question number 2. With which two drivers did Fernando Alonso perform celebratory donuts at his final Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi in 2018? Here are the options. Was it A, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen? B, Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel? C, Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen? D, Sebastian Vettel and Stoffel van Dorn? E, Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo? Or F, Lewis Hamilton and Kimi Räikkönen? Fernando had his special farewell livery on his McLaren that weekend, but can you remember what the other cars looked like and, crucially, who was driving them? Right, on to question number 3. In what year was the, as yet, final Portuguese Grand Prix? Was it A, 1986, B, 1991, was it C, 1994, D, 1996, E, 1999, or F, 2002? There's been 16 F1 World Championship races held in Portugal, the majority held at the Estoril circuit, which is where the final race was held. Does that help? Okay, on to question number 4. Both of Michael Schumacher's final F1 races came at the same circuit, 2006 and 2012. But which circuit was it? Was it A, Interlagos, B, Abu Dhabi, C, Monza, D, Suzuka, E, Adelaide, or F, Shanghai? 2 farewell races, one as a Ferrari driver, one as a Mercedes driver. Moving from his final teams in Formula One, though, to his very first, Jordan. But can you remember what the last race was that Jordan competed in as Jordan, before its myriad of name changes that took it to now being Racing Point and will take it on to being Aston Martin? Was it the Chinese Grand Prix of 2005? Was it the Brazilian Grand Prix of 2005? The United States Grand Prix of 2006? The Japanese Grand Prix of 2004? The Brazilian Grand Prix of 2006? Or the Malaysian Grand Prix in 2004? The Jordans lined up P15 and P19 on the grid for their final race, the final result being P11 and a DNF. Okay, now on to our final question. So let's go back a little bit further. In which year did the old Nürburgring circuit, the Nordschleife, host the German Grand Prix for the final time? Was it A, 1974, B, 1976, C, 1978, D, 1980, E, 1982, or F, 1984? This then is the 22.8 kilometre monstrous circuit, which Jackie Stewart branded the Green Hell. What was the last year that it hosted the German Grand Prix? Okay, get those answers in. And while you're doing so, time for this week's bonus question. Once again, not for points, just for pride and a little bit of fun. We will give the answer to the bonus question at the start of next week's quiz. Name as many circuits as you can to have hosted 20 or more Grand Prix. For the avoidance of doubt, if a circuit has changed its name over time, but it's still the same place, that's the same. That's one circuit. You can have that. We count 19 in total to have hosted 20 or more Grand Prix. Get your thinking hats on. Don't cheat. Don't look it up. See how many you can draw out of the recesses of your mind. Now, if you had a go at the last bonus round, now's the time to see how you did. We asked how many Ford-powered constructors have scored podiums, and these are the teams you could have had. Remember, it wasn't Cosworth powered, it was Ford power. You could have had Lotus, of course, McLaren, Matra, Brabham, March, Tyrrell, Surtees, Shadow, Hesketh, Williams, Penske, Wolf, Fittipaldi, Arrows, Ligier, Benetton, of course, Dallara, Onyx, Sauber, Stewart, and Jordan. It's a bit of a random order to put them in, but there you go. Well done if you got them all, but more than 15 right. Hell, I'd say more than 10 right is a pretty good effort right there. So let's see now how you did with this week's question. Right, here come your answers. Round 1 was one-hit wonders. So stop, collaborate, and listen. Robert Kubica had just one pole position in his Formula 1 career to go with his one Formula 1 Grand Prix victory. So 1 is the answer you were looking for. Question number 2. Lance Stroll's first and thus far only podium came after starting where? The answer was B, P8. Question number 3. Giancarlo Baghetti won on debut. The only driver ever to have done so. Lewis Hamilton, of course, came close, so too did Jacques Villeneuve. But Baghetti is the only one to have done so that is A. He won on debut. Rubens Barrichello was second to Jean Alesi in Canada in 1995. It was his highest finish at the time and only his second podium, so that was F. Rubens Barrichello. Now, everyone remembers, of course, what happened in the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix. Contact between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. Senna coming back onto the track and crossing the line in first place to win the race, but then having that win controversially stripped from him. Nannini won, but where did he finish on track? He finished second behind Senna. B was the correct answer. On to the next question. The final one for this round, question 6. Heikki Kovalainen's only Formula 1 win came, do you remember it? It came in Hungary in 2008. So that was answer C. Okay, Radio Gaga round 2 and question number 1. Quite incredibly, a piece of radio from Fernando Alonso during his tenure at McLaren that isn't complaining about the car. It is instead complaining about
What Palmer is doing? He needs to give me back the position. Cut the chicane.
Palmer has a 5-second penalty.
5 seconds, it's a joke. A joke.
Jolyon Palmer and what he saw as a very soft penalty given to the British driver. The answer was Jolyon Palmer. That was F. Question number 2. Who was the Elvis impersonator? The answer was E. Alex Albon, who of course was so close to that first Formula 1 podium before getting punted by Lewis Hamilton in Brazil, for which Hamilton then received a post-race penalty. Question number 3, the tears of joy. Famous tears of joy, and I think tears shared throughout the Formula 1 pit lane for one of the most loved characters in the sport, Rubens Barrichello, his first Formula 1 win way back in 2000. The answer was B, Rubens Barrichello, and a momentous, joyous day for the Ferrari driver. Question number 4, who hit Romain Grosjean? I'm sure everyone remembers, but let's check. Of course, the answer was A, Marcus Ericsson. Question number 5. Who isn't leaving Fernando Alonso enough space? All the time. You have to leave space. It was Nico Rosberg, of course, answer C. And question number 6. Steering wheel, blank, and steering wheel. Ooh. Let's check to see if you got the missing word.
Steering wheel. Gloves and steering wheel here.
Yep, if you put gloves and steering wheel, then pat yourself on the back. You got that one right. On to round 3. Round 3 then is all about first lap crashes. Question 1, the expletive-laden piece of radio from Sebastian Vettel in Sochi was aimed at B. Danny Kvyat, of course. Question 2, a 2-part answer for this. Which 2 drivers did Romain Grosjean help to nerf out of the race at the start of the Spanish Grand Prix in that plume of smoke? It was Nico Hülkenberg and Pierre Gasly. So if you put down A and C, you were correct. Question 3, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost collided at turn 1 in Japan in 1990, but who went on to win the race? It was Nelson Piquet for Benetton. Question number 4, in Belgium 2012, you will of course have remembered Romain Grosjean receiving a penalty for causing a collision at the start. It wasn't just a penalty though, it was a race ban. It was actually Pastor Maldonado who jumped the start. So there you go. It was C, Pastor Maldonado. On to one of the tricky questions now where we don't give you a multiple choice. This massive pile-up at the British Grand Prix was caused by Jody Scheckter, but what year did it occur? It was 1973. Well done if you got that one right. And lastly, going back to the very first year of the Formula One World Championship, believe it or not, it was flooding from high waves over the sea wall in Monaco, which caused all those retirements in just the second World Championship race. So answer B. Right, onto lid liveries. This is either going to be a round that you loved or hated. Question number 1. The colour and the design represents 8 oars and was used by the London Rowing Club, for whom Graham Hill rowed. His son Damon also used the same design on his helmet, so its answers A and E, Damon and Graham Hill. Question number 2, this Evel Knievel tribute for the 2016 US Grand Prix was actually worn by Daniel Ricciardo. So that's answer E. Question 3, 3 blue stripes, and they were, of course, Mika Hakkinen. Now, the colourful swirls in question 4, based loosely around his father Gilles' design, with many more colours in use. This was the helmet of Jacques Villeneuve. That's answer B. Question number 5. Yes, it's Michael Schumacher's helmet, but no, it's not Michael Schumacher that's wearing it. David Coulthard was struggling with his helmet during the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix. The visor kept misting up, and Michael lent him a spare for the Grand Prix, one of those strange occasions in F1 history. So the correct answer is F, David Coulthard. Which brings us through to the final question in this round. Who had the light-up helmet? It is, of course, the king of the unique livery lid at each Grand Prix back in the day. Sebastian Vettel had that light-up helmet at the 2012 Singapore Grand Prix, and with the restrictions easing for 2020, one wonders how many different helmet designs we'll see from the German multiple world champion this year. So how did you do? Did you know your helmet without raising a sweat? Or were you hoping for better? On to the next round. Okay, on to the higher or lower round. 50-50 chance on all of these. If you flipped a coin, good luck to you, because here come the answers. Ayrton Senna had a higher number of consecutive podiums than his great rival Alain Prost. He had 8 in 1988, while Prost was only 1 behind, scoring 7 consecutive podiums 3 times in his career, actually in 85, 88 and through the 88 to 89 seasons. So that is answer 1, higher. Question 2 and 1 for the glorious geeks out there. The racing number that Mansell used in his debut race, was it higher or lower than the number that Emerson Fittipaldi used in his debut race? Those of you who have the brains for these kind of things will remember that Nigel Mansell made his debut in a third car for Arrows in Austria in 1980 and ran with number 43 while Emerson Fittipaldi debuted the number 28 in Great Britain in 1970. So Mansell's debut number was higher than that of Emerson Fittipaldi. On to question 3 now. Fernando Alonso enjoys a higher number of career poles than Damon Hill, but it was close. 22 for Alonso and 20 for Damon Hill. On to question 4 now, and it was that tricky one about Gerhard Berger and Riccardo Patrese. The length of time between first and last wins. Well, it turns out that Gerhard Berger had the greater number of days, the greater amount of time between first and last wins. 10 years, 9 months and 15 days between Berger's first and last wins. 10 years, 5 months and 2 days between Patrese. All of which brings us to question 5 and the battle of the Aussies, Mark Webber and Alan Jones. And it was Mark Webber that we asked the question of. Was his tally higher or lower in the win stakes in Formula 1 than Alan Jones? The correct answer is it was lower. Alan Jones had 12 career wins, Mark Webber had 9. The final round now, and it's all about the final races. For question 1, we asked you, where did Ayrton Senna record his final win in Formula 1? And the correct answer was A, Adelaide. You may remember the post-race party, the post-race concert. Tina Turner dragging Ayrton on stage to sing Simply the Best. Question number 2. Joining Fernando Alonso in those end-of-season celebratory donuts were B, Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. Question 3 now. The final Portuguese Grand Prix was held in 1996. Both farewell races for Michael Schumacher occurred where? You may remember in the first instance, he was given a trophy by Pelé. Kimi Räikkönen missed it though, he was otherwise indisposed. The answer is A, Interlagos. Which brings us to question 5. The last race for Jordan Grand Prix was the Chinese Grand Prix in 2005. And so to the final question from the final round. The last time Nürburgring's Nordschleife hosted the German Grand Prix was when? Fittingly, given the horrific accident that occurred in that race, 1976 was the last time that the Nordschleife was used for a Formula 1 Grand Prix. The answer was B, 1976. So how did you do? Better than last time? Not quite as good as last time. I imagine your enjoyment will depend heavily on how your score went. We hope you have enjoyed it though. We will be back very soon for another round of quizzing. In the meantime though, learn more about F1 and its history. Watch old races on f1.com and of course on F1 TV. For now though, from us, that's your quizzing lot.
If I was born to be a winner, then I'ma grow up to be a go-getter. Blood, sweat, and tears written in the blacks of kings. 1 in a million, the billions that have to sing.